radio network at paranormalking.com.
Welcome to the Paranormal News Insider for the week of November 17th, 2020. And this is officially episode number 458. And this is your host, Dr. Brian D. Parsons. And we are live on the Paranormal King radio network at paranormalking.com. And if you're not here, well, you can't hear me anyway, unless you're listening to an archive of the show, which I thank you for doing that as well. But we enjoy having you all cuddled up nice and warm here in the chat room with us at paranormalking.com, hanging out and staying warm. I don't know about you, but I woke up this morning to a few inches of snow. It's winter is here in Northeast Ohio already. Overnight, we had heavy storms during the week, lost power for about 14 hours during the week, and now we're experiencing winter. So we went from summer to winter all in a week. That's pretty much the Midwest for you here in the United States. This week we finally got some Bigfoot news, sort of. We also will talk a lot about UFOs and space tonight. So if you're a UFO buff and you like space, this is going to be a great show for you tonight. And, you know, I was thinking about it. It's November 17th, and I realized I better get to work pretty quickly on the top 10 paranormal news stories of 2020. I got to figure out what I'm going to do this year as far as a format is concerned. Some years I'll release 2 stories a week, and some I've done 3 stories a week with the number, I guess it would be the last 4 all in one show. So I'm not sure how I'm going to do it this year. It's been a really, I don't know what other word to say other than depressing, maybe horrible year of 2020, and the paranormal kind of largely kind of in the background for the most part for a lot of people, dealing with financial things and a lot of other issues with this COVID-19. But we will count it down this year. I still got to figure out how I'm going to do that. Depends on the stories. Depends on really what we're talking about. Really a lackluster year compared to last year with the Roswell thing and a lot of other zany things that happened last year. But we will count it down in some form or fashion. More than likely looking at probably the last 3 or 4 shows in December. So we still have a few weeks until the top 10 paranormal news stories of 2020 debuts. And my hope is, it usually doesn't happen. Every now and again, there's a nice big story that happens in November or early December. It's extremely rare. That's another reason why I like to count down in December, is because there's really not a whole lot of stuff going on. And yeah, it's this time of the year. It's cold. It's blustery. People are buying things. They're not worried about they're not worried about the paranormal. They're worried about their Amazon orders and what they're going to get for Christmas. Although this year is again a little different. The entire year is a little different, but yet I think at the same time people want some normalcy, so they're going to continue to do what they've done in years past and hang out with the friends and family, go out to Thanksgiving dinner, and try to have a traditional Christmas. I know I'm not having either one of those. We had originally planned on having family over, planning on hosting Christmas this year, but that's not going to happen, probably no matter what. So yeah, it's depressing, but we'll get through it together, and that's what I'm here for, to give you 1 hour of relief a week from all the troubles and strife that you might be encountering out there. Yeah, I guess they're going to have to redo all those Christmas animation shows, and maybe even the Is it really Thanksgiving stuff? I don't think so anymore. But the Christmas shows, they're gonna have to put like masks on Santa now. I think he's gonna have to wear a mask, and he's probably gonna be prohibited from distributing toys to certain children in certain countries due to having to wait 14 days to get into those countries. It's complicated stuff now. But anyway, came here for the paranormal news, and we're gonna jump right into cryptid news this week. And I mentioned at the top of the show, Bigfoot is in the news. Well, sort of. It's been a very quiet year for Bigfoot. I don't know what's going on with the big guy, or maybe he's just hiding out. The COVID-19 was really the only thing that really mentioned Bigfoot, because he's the social distancing champion. I know that's so old. Yeah, he used to be the hide and seek champion. Now he's the social distancing champion. But yeah, we haven't heard any actual stories of sightings or anything drama related to Bigfoot this year. But one of the biggest stories of the year took shape over the last week, and it ends up just a couple of days ago with a happy ending toward the end of last week. And it's this is the type of story I've kind of ignored pretty much over the last couple of years actually, that I've seen these stories pop up. I tend to sidestep these because it's really not really deep paranormal stuff. Like I talk about deep paranormal stuff on the show. But anyway, it's not really something that's I'm going to wedge into a show unless it's really nothing going on that week. But really, the more I think about it, and I was thinking about this story, I kind of put it on my tentative list of stories that I wanted to cover this week. But the more I thought about it, this is becoming quite a strange trend that's been occurring over the course of the last few years. And that trend is stolen Bigfoot statues. So last year, a Bigfoot statue was stolen from a Beaver Township, Ohio business, who also suffered the loss of a Bigfoot family of statues in 2017. Also last year, an 8-foot statue was stolen outside of a Florida mattress store. Another one was snatched from the front lawn of a Sand Springs, Oklahoma woman's home. And in November of last year, in front of the Mountaineer Landscaping Company in North Carolina. Well, those are all pretty big stories, regional stories. And that's just a few. Another one went missing from Mattress Monsters in Boynton Beach, Florida in October of last year. So there's a whole bunch of these thefts. And those are just the big ones. There's a lot more. It's weird. I guess people steal all kinds of statues, but Bigfoot statues, and a lot of those that I mentioned are different. Some of them are the same ones you see in those magazines, the very typical Bigfoot statues. Some of these are one-of-a-kind type of things. And I think about half of those were actually discovered. Now, earlier this year, a 6-foot-tall statue was snatched from the front yard of an anthropology professor at UMass in Brimfield, Massachusetts. And another one was reportedly stolen from a Brightwood, Oregon home. I think that was in March. And but the biggest one of the year, the biggest Bigfoot stolen statue story of the year, I guess, comes from California. Last Monday, November 9th, a wooden statue of Bigfoot was reportedly stolen from in front of the Bigfoot Discovery Museum in Felton, California, sometime between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. Also stolen was a statue of a bear, but nobody cared about the bear, apparently. It was all about the Bigfoot, even though it was like a 4.5-foot tall statue, not a very big statue. The story gained a lot of traction from many large news sources and was even bigger of a story when authorities finally located the statue on Thursday morning. Scotts Valley Police Department officers discovered a, quote, suspicious figure on the side of the road near Glen Canyon and Green Hills Road. And I actually have a picture of that. When they rolled up, Bigfoot was just chilling there on the side of the road. Kind of cool. Surprised nobody stole it for a second time, to be honest with you. But apparently people just dumped it off. And probably because the story was pretty popular, and a lot of people were looking for this thing. California, news travels fast about everything, and like I said, this was a regional story. It got a lot of traction throughout the paranormal as well as throughout the mainstream media. I was pretty amazed at how many news outlets were talking about this thing. It was kind of amazing to see the amount of people that were talking about a stolen statue. Again, it happens quite a bit. And the figure was snatched up again. I guess the police department loaded it up and brought it back to the museum. So the Bigfoot Discovery Museum has its Bigfoot back. It's a feel-good story, I guess, if you ever have one into paranormal. Let's see. Here's the tweet. I guess a tweet at the police department, and they took a little snapshot there in front of the museum with a little Bigfoot. He's not very big. He's not a big Bigfoot. He's a little big Bigfoot. A little Bigfoot? Something like that. But he's back. And the Bigfoot Discovery Museum, it opened back in 2004, but due to COVID-19, it's currently closed. That's why nobody really noticed that it was missing in the middle of the afternoon. Keep your paws off of other people's stuff. Don't steal things. But I'm glad that the story got some popularity, and it's probably what led to the Bigfoot being dumped. I know in the past, we've seen some of these stories get pretty big, and the Bigfoot is rediscovered or turned back in. So maybe you get enough popularity of these stories, and people feel that pressure, and they want to. They don't want to get caught, I guess, because who wants to go to jail over stealing a Bigfoot statue? Kind of embarrassing. It's pretty low in the pecking order in prison, I think, for those people who steal Bigfoot statues. I don't think you're going to get in the front of the lunch line with that. And I'll throw this link in the chat room. My gosh, all you have to do is type in Bigfoot right now and click on news on Google, and you will definitely read about this story. It's the biggest Bigfoot story of the year by far, with the amount of people that are covering that story. And one last thing here in cryptid news. Pretty boring week in the week of for the week of cryptid news, but I want to re-mention a story that I talked about. Is that a word? Re-mention? Yeah, mention again. The Alligator Robb story last week that I talked about. He's in a fight to have enough money to have heart surgery. He doesn't have health insurance. Bigfoot wrangling doesn't really pay the bills very well, and there's not really a whole lot of health insurers that's going to cover you for wrestling alligators. The alligator trapper captured Chance the Snapper. That's a pretty tough sentence to say. Try repeating that 10 times fast. The alligator trapper captured Chance the Snapper last year in Chicago. Not only captured the alligator, but he also captured the hearts of many in the Windy City. And very big story, one of the biggest stories of Chicago's year, although they had a lot of things going on there last year. But now he needs your help. And a GoFundMe site has been set up to help save Alligator Robb. But it's only collected about $41,000 of the estimated $300,000 needed to not only have the surgery as well as recovery, incidental things that he's going to need along the way. And obviously he's not going to be able to wrangle alligators for a little while, so he's got to pay the bills somehow. So it's been estimated about $300,000 between surgery, travel, recovery, recuperation. And we got to buy him a stuffed alligator. I think that would be, the nice thing to do as well. So I've donated, and I hope that you can as well. Rob is a genuine guy. Really, really nice guy. If you've ever heard him talk, if you've seen some of his interviews, very humble, very quiet guy to himself. And if it wasn't for his friends starting this campaign, we probably would not have heard about what was going on in his life. So I've gotten both of his books that he's published, the children's coloring book, as well as the, I guess you'd call it a young adult crocodile book. And that one was autographed. Very happy to have that in my possession. And I hope Frank is okay, and I hope everything goes smoothly for him. And if you can, please donate to the GoFundMe campaign for him. I know money is tight all around the world for everybody, but we got to help each other out when we can, if we can. And I know I'm in a place that I can give a little bit of money to help Frank out, and he's a fantastic guy. So let me throw that link there in the chat room. And if you're not in the chat room, well, you didn't see the link, but don't worry. During the week, I will put out these links through Facebook, which then puts them out through Twitter. Thank heavens for technology. And you can then see these links. And obviously, everybody can look up stories on your own. You don't need me to tell you what the links are, but some of these links, other than obviously the GoFundMe campaign, which is there's only one link, some of these stories have multiple links, and I like to chase down either original links or links that have more information sometimes than the popular links that get passed around on paranormal news sites. Sometimes those links that paranormal news sites use are, let's just say they use ones with the least amount of information so they can make up their own kind of angle on these stories or keep them a little bit more mysterious than what they really, really are. Now, that's why I do the show, to uncover the truth behind these stories and bring them to light for you to be able to see. That's the goal here anyway. And that's your cryptid news for the week. Now we move into UFO news. And they say everything's bigger in Texas, which is kind of sort of true. If you've ever had to drive around Texas, everything is like 2 hours away from each other. But it seems like you drive forever to get anywhere in Texas. The roads are longer, I think. It's a big state. And the Lone Star State has had its fair share of large-scale UFO, well, I guess you could talk about strange light phenomena as well. The Marfa lights down there. Over the years, from the Aurora UFO crash, purported UFO crash. I'm not still a big fan of that story. Back in 1897, which actually happened pretty close to where the story takes place, interestingly enough, now that I think about it, to the Stephenville UFO chase of 2008, which actually was pretty close to this incident as well. When you're talking about Texas, that's pretty weird to have those two incidents as well as this next one pretty close together. Well, another mass UFO sighting has occurred, this one on November 11th, as multiple witnesses reported seeing moving lights in the sky, pretty much in an estimated 80-mile radius around the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas metroplex. A video popped up online filmed by Javier Estrada III, which showed 4 bright lights moving in a diamond shape, then moving into a straight line. Later on, 2 more lights came into view from below and seemingly followed the 4 other lights. Pretty mysterious, pretty spooky looking video. The lights were seen from various aspects around the large neighboring Texas cities, including a couple that I've been to. Granbury, Texas. A friend of mine who was born in Granbury. Been there a couple of times, so it's pretty cool to hear about some places that I've been. But looking on a map kind of put things in a little bit of perspective for me, which I'll kind of wrap the story up around in that. But yeah, they were seen from all over the place. They seem to be focused on southern Fort Worth, but also seen from the North Dallas area. And if you've ever been to Dallas, Fort Worth, I'm sure you've probably not forgotten it for a number of reasons, but it's a pretty big, just a city, basically a city on top of a city. Imagine like 2 giant cities just smashed up against each other, but you can see each skyline. Depends on your perspective, but you can see each skyline from each area. It's pretty wacky to see 2 big cities kind of put together pretty close, fairly close. I mean, they're still pretty far away, but you can see it's just a smattering of cities. A lot of communities around there, and pretty much the southern areas where a majority of these sightings occurred. On his video, Javier says, quote, "I was visiting family for my grandma's birthday and happened to look up. What I saw mesmerized me, not memorized, but mesmerized. I saw glowing lights hovering real slow, and that's when I knew it was something out of the ordinary. Not scary, just crazy to look at. I do believe in extraterrestrials, so the first thing that came to mind was a UFO. As soon as I saw it, I was starstruck. It seemed so real, unquote. And I'll give you, if you've not seen the video, I'll give you kind of a snapshot. It doesn't do it any justice to see pictures of videos. Sometimes I kind of put things together so you can see the movement of things, but it's watching this is pretty interesting because it's the movement is pretty interesting. These objects, how they kind of make these shapes, and here you see a kind of a diamond shape of these UFOs, and these objects then kind of rotated seemingly, and they moved to the left, and then you saw two other ones pop up from the bottom right hand side and then kind of follow along toward these other four. So weird. A lot of the comments of the stories and videos, this is obviously on YouTube. A couple of other people have hijacked the original video or borrowed it, I guess, and monetized it for their own channels, their own YouTube channels. So I've read through a lot of the comments, sometimes looking for extra information to help solve these things, as well as comb through newspaper reports. It wasn't a whole lot of information. I was really surprised at how little news reports there really were. Seemed most of the stuff covering this was for the United Kingdom. Well, that's because a particular UFO researcher got a hold of it and put the video on his website. And there was a couple of radio stations, local radio stations in and around the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area that covered this story. But it wasn't really super big mainstream stuff, which is kind of shocked to see that. I did a lot of digging to figure that out, why, but not sure. Many of the comments of the stories and videos state that it could be airplanes, and I don't think so. I don't think so. I've spent a lot of time watching airplanes. I grew up at the basically at the foot of a municipal airport, so I'm pretty familiar with smaller aircraft, and also where I grew up was on the peripheral of where the jets for Cleveland's Hopkins International Airport would circle around, and you could literally watch these planes be stacked up. And I used to work on the other side of the airport, so I had to drive by the airport pretty much right underneath where the planes would land, right there on the freeway in I-480. And you could literally, if you had the moment to glance over, probably when you weren't driving is a lot better because that's a really scary place to drive. You could literally see about 17 to 20 some odd miles of jets stacked in the sky, literally stacked. You could see lights behind lights of approaching planes, approaching jets. So I'm pretty well versed in seeing airplanes, and I tell you, I just don't get the feeling that what we're looking at are airplanes. Not just the lights, but the way they're moving, the formations. A light would indicate, white light would indicate a jet moving toward you, and these just don't behave that way. And he's not really familiar with this area. This is his grandma's house, so he's probably not familiar with the air traffic, but it doesn't look like jets if you watch the video. Others point out that there are several military installations in and around the area, which is absolutely true. And the premise is that these could be helicopters. And again, I guess it could be true, but again, there's no flashing lights, there's no tail rotor lights. And from the distance that we see them, I would assume you might be able to hear engines of helicopters. Having 6 helicopters in the air, I think you'd hear it. The formation, again, wouldn't suggest that these were helicopters. I think they would be, if they were flying a dignitary or doing any sort of maneuvers, they would have been a little bit closer in formation. But again, watching the video, I don't see that these are aircraft at all. Which, when you toss out those explanations, to me, I only have three other possible explanations. One, which I guess, well, I'll throw out the most outlandish one of the three, and that would be that these are definitely UFOs. Unidentified flying objects, we would assume, would be from alien origin. Yes, I know UFO just means unidentified. Doesn't mean that it's an alien aircraft. But it's generally accepted that UFO tends to mean an aircraft of intelligent design that's not from the United States here. So, yeah, so we eliminate that one. And I say, again, outlandish since there's a possibility, but I think the two other possibilities are greater. So I'm not discounting the possibility of UFOs, be it alien spacecraft or maybe craft that we're not aware of, maybe spy satellites or spy craft that just somehow made it from the Texas Gulf Coast all the way up to the DFW area. Probably not likely. And originally, when I watched this video, I have to say that I was really thinking initially that these were drones. And a lot of people have also said drones. And, to me, that's the knee-jerk reaction. They seem to operate very quickly. And again, they fly in a formation. And if you know anything about drones, you can program these things. And if you have multiple ones, you can put them on frequencies that will allow them to fly in formations or chase each other or do pretty much whatever you want them to do. Granted, those cost a lot of money. But again, one of the witnesses, and there's other videos other than this one. So that's why I know it's probably not a fake. It would have to be pretty elaborate, but we've seen that before with the Jerusalem UFO videos back in, what was that, 2008? That was a series of videos that were hoaxed, made to look like various vantage points of the same event. I don't think this is the case. I think these are, I've only seen two videos, but I've seen other pictures. Not sure if the pictures are the same thing. I think sometimes people see other things and then they want to be a part of the main story. But the other video definitely is not definitely not a drone. To me, it looks more like a Chinese lantern floating by. And then I started reading other comments about Chinese lanterns, and there's some pretty. Whenever you use Chinese lantern, it's kind of like swamp gas from the 1940s to the on to the 40s and 50s and 60s. People get upset when you say swamp gas about trying to explain UFOs. It's probably not likely. But Chinese lanterns, I would say, are a very big explanation for UFOs. I've seen quite a few Chinese lanterns myself. I've watched them. I've actually chased them in my car. I've taken quite a few pictures of them, observed them, watched how they move through the sky, and have actually chased down a few MUFON reports that turned out to be ones that I've seen that I had to call them or let them know that, hey, I observed these Chinese lanterns on this date at this time, moving in this direction. So that's what you guys got. But those witnesses on these comments, on these videos, and some of the stories, they seem to be the minority. And again, nobody wanted to believe them in their statements. Although their statements seem to be pretty credible, people said, no, it can't be Chinese lanterns. These are intelligent, the way they move. But, the more I watch the videos, the more I started thinking that, you know what, maybe this is more of a possibility than drones, the way these lights are moving. And I know from this particular video, the main video that's out there, the lights seem to move in a pattern of a diamond shaped, and they look like they're rotating, and they look like they're then getting in a line and moving in one direction. But you have to remember that that's just the perspective of this individual camera that's aiming in this direction. And Chinese lanterns will seemingly fly in formation. When they're released together, they're going to move up into the sky. They're going to gain a little bit of elevation, and eventually they kind of top out from the temperature wherever once the wind takes away their ability to elevate, and it's got a lot to do with temperature and time of day and humidity level. There's a lot of factors that go into how high a Chinese lantern is going to go. The design of it and how big the candle is and the capacity of the hot air. But there's a lot of things. Most of the Chinese lanterns I see don't fly up very high, but in hot weather they can fly a lot higher. Warmer air, they can fly a lot higher. And I think what we're seeing in this video, especially when you see two other ones go up in the air, I'm pretty sure that that's just them being launched. And yeah, the argument could be said for drones at the same time, but again, drones tend to have strobes. Drones tend to be more mechanical in their motion. If you've watched drones fly, and they tend to stop and hover at times. Not always, but these don't seem mechanical. They just seem like they're moving with the wind, and the way they're gaining elevation, they're moving in a straight line. And the drone thing. So let's talk about the drone possibility. Well, the more I thought about it, the possibility is lowered. Since again, there's military installations in the area. One of the videos was filmed literally near the back gates of an installation. So probably not going to be drones. Whoever's flying drones near a military installation, that would have been discovered very quickly. Yeah, it would have been shut down very fast. Yeah, and then you have to consider an 80-mile radius. So people reported seeing these lights in and around the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. Now, if these were drones, you're not going to see them that far away. And drones don't really fly that far. At least the ones you can get off the shelf or order, the ones that are going to cost you less than a few $1,000s. You're not going to be able to fly them through a major metropolitan area like that. Because, again, they were seen from South Fort Worth all the way to northern Dallas. So that means that somebody would have had to have flown this pretty much through airspace of, I think I estimated 3 or 4 different airports. That's not going to happen. And again, drones aren't going to fly that far, 2-3 hours away. So that's why I started thinking this cannot be drones. But Chinese lanterns would flow with the wind. And if you look at the pathway, now I don't have the time stamps of these videos, and I don't know when these witnesses actually seen them. But from the cities listed, if you kind of estimate when the times were, it flows with where the wind would have gone during that exact time of day, or in the evening, I should say. The wind wasn't very strong, but once you get aloft like that, the winds increase. And again, when you have a flame on a candle with the paper, it's going to cause movement anyway. So I think that's what you're seeing, Chinese lanterns. And if they would have flown, they don't fly very far. I'm sure about 100 miles is as far as you're going to get on one of those things, if that, which these didn't even fly that far. I think the furthest distance was like 72 miles, the way an object would fly, estimated using Google software. So it could have explained that. Again, it might not have flown that far, just that person saw it. So I would say Chinese lanterns. But again, I'm not saying it's definitively Chinese lanterns. But again, that would explain why so many different people in different areas would spot these lights and why they were not reported by aircraft or on radar. They weren't that high. They weren't large solid objects like a drone. They weren't creating any radio interference or anything like that. Yeah, people get busted pretty quick because these things emit. Airports are constantly not just on a physical lookout, but they know when people are using them with the radio interference. So you're not going to get away with it. That's why I think it's Chinese lanterns. But yeah, I was hoping the story would get a little bit bigger. But again, only a handful of people have talked about it. I've combed through Twitter, I've combed through Facebook. I've not heard any updates on this at all. But my guess would be Chinese lanterns. And let me throw that link to, I got like 5 links here. Do one of the local news talk stations, the 1290 AM station. I can't remember. It's near. I think it's closer to Dallas area, but I'll throw that link in the chat room. And again, don't worry. If you're not in chat and you can't get these links, I will be putting them out through Facebook and through Twitter. Again, that's facebook.com/ParaNewsInsider. And Twitter would be @ParaNewsInsider. So you'll be able to follow these stories along during the week. And don't worry, I don't shove all these things out all at the same time. I do pretty much one story a day. So once a day, I'm putting out one story. And all right, enough of Dallas Fort Worth. Let's go to Mexico. Why not? Love to go to Mexico right now. So the story of this next, or I should say the headline of this next story, a little bit misleading. No, it's completely misleading. Not a little bit. The article is titled, quote, "There's no explanation for this weird glowing ball hovering over a forest in Mexico," unquote. That's not the best headline I've ever seen. But again, it's also very misleading. The video is out of Guadalajara, Mexico, and shows what appears to be a floating ball of light hovering in front of trees in a forest. The ball of light seems to be getting brighter and dimmer over the 3-minute plus long video, which is amazing to see any kind of UFO video last that long. The camera is zoomed way in. You can see the heat, the air kind of moving from the heat and all that. And then they zoom out. So you can tell, it's zoomed way in. They're pretty far away. And again, they say there's no explanation, but I'd say one of the most likely explanations for this is something that's in the tree that is reflecting light. These are shot during the day, so it's probably reflecting sunlight in some form or fashion. And interestingly, the YouTube channel where this video originated, Alberto Ignacio Alejo Ibarra, that's the channel, you can look it up yourself, contains nothing but UFO videos of various types, including a bunch of these glowing objects hanging out in the trees. And the big problem I have, and I watch these videos, the problem I have is these glowing objects are doing just that. They're just hanging out in trees. They're not flying around. They're not flying above trees. They're not going down between trees. They're not going behind trees. They're just hanging out in the trees. And they're always shot from an extremely far distance. And the current video, if you watch it, any Spanish at all, during the commentary, during one of the videos, they're talking about a lot of other things, cars and different things, but they also talk about the objects having been observed moving. Well, we don't see any movement in any of the videos, and they're on that particular object for over 3 minutes, and we don't see it move, other than a little bit of movement when the wind blows. And you can tell by watching branches around the object, you can tell that it seems like it's attached to the tree. So I'm not sure why they would say there's no explanation, because it seems pretty simple to me. I would say whatever's in the trees is reflecting light, or possibly even a light source, but probably a reflective light source somehow. I mean, gosh, who knows? Maybe they've just put aluminum foil up there, for all we know. Could be something that simple. And filmed from a distance. So even when you're able to zoom in, you still can't discern what the object is. And I think that's the point here, that they've gone and put this object as far away as possible. There's, like I said, there's like 4 or 5 different videos of this, and some of the other videos of these UFOs are pretty corny as well. But you can check out Alberto Ignacio Alejo Ibarra's YouTube channel for yourself, and you can judge that. But this particular video was picked up, and it's all over my my Google News and different sources. I've seen it on a bunch of different paranormal sites, and people are making a bigger mystery out of something that I don't think is a big mystery myself. And we've reached the point of the show that, so we're talking about extraterrestrials, potential UFOs here. And I want to give the book of the week, but I also, I tend to do a book of the week. 99% of these books are books that I've actually read. I can speak to. I can say that they actually provide value to anybody reading them who is interested in the paranormal, wants to be a paranormal researcher or investigator. And I can vouch for it because I've actually read those books. But this week, I want to give some suggested reading on these topics about belief in potential UFOs, as well as a little bit of research behind those as well. In addition to an actual book of the week, and a lot of the books of the week are historical, so they go back a long ways. 60s, 50s, 80s. That was so long ago, the 1980s. Sheesh, so much has changed. But I know there's a lot of new work out there that people should read or look at. New ideas, new thoughts, new themes. And, I don't want to lose the new ideas and information. And I can't speak to those because I haven't read all these books yet, although I have a very large Christmas list put together of books, including some UFO stuff. And one book I want to mention is called They Are Already Here, UFO Culture and Why We See Saucers. And that's written by Sarah Scholes, who she's not a UFO researcher. She's not a UFO investigator, not really even too much of a UFO believer, just a person gathering information on sightings, first-person experiences. And it's a kind of an anthropological look at the UFO community. So it's kind of from an outside observer's look at the UFO community, which sometimes is a refreshing perspective because we tend to read books written on UFO sightings that are written by UFO researchers. So we tend to not really maybe get the entire picture. We're only getting what they want to believe. And so you're being forced to believe what somebody else believes. And that can be a dangerous thing sometimes. It can be a dangerous road to travel down. So now we're reading from an outside perspective. And I think this is a really fresh vantage point to have as a UFO researcher, reading what other people think about what we're doing. And this book is definitely on my list. I think it's a really interesting view to look at the UFO culture and why we believe what we believe from, our perspective, from the perspective of somebody on the outside. So They Are Already Here, UFO Culture and Why We See Saucers. There's a hardcover. It's about $20. You can get them used for about $18. You can get them cheaper than that. The book came out this year, March 3rd of 2020. So it's a newer book. And it's 304 pages. So you're going to get your money's worth on that. It's got a pretty good rating here on Amazon. When I'm looking at it here, it's 39 ratings, and it's 4.5. I'm sorry, 4.4 out of 5 stars. It's a pretty good book, I would say. It's on my list for me to read and hopefully to get. If I don't get it for Christmas, I'm going to probably buy it anyway. But not just that one, but another book that I want to talk about. This one is even higher on my list. It's called Contact Paradox, The Challenging Our Assumptions and the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And that book came out January 21st of this year. It's also available hardcover, Kindle, paperback, audio CD. So you can get it in various formats. I can't drive and listen to somebody talk about a book. I can't do that. I got to read. I got to have a book in my hands. But the Contact Paradox, Challenging Our Assumptions in the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. It's a really interesting concept, really interesting. I've read an article about this when this book first launched earlier this year, and I kind of I read, I think it was like in March or April, I read a review of this book, and I was kind of fascinated by it. And since then, it's been on my list to buy, and I just never got around to it. But there's a lot of interesting concepts about this book that we don't tend to think about. One big thing is if we're going to talk about contacting extraterrestrial intelligence or intelligent life that may be more intelligent than we are, have we really thought about, other than using math, we assume that math is a communication tool that everybody understands. Well, we're making that assumption. Maybe math is just an elementary way of communication, and maybe they're more advanced than we are. Have we even made attempts to figure out how to communicate with animals, which are other creatures here on our own planet? Now, I know I read, I think I saw an article on a cat app that when your cat meows, it interprets it into language. I think that's just, I don't think that's real. I think it's just random word generator personally. But, think about it. Dolphins are said to be very intelligent. We've talked some of the great apes sign language, so we're able to communicate with some apes. But dolphins, if you've ever seen a TV show, Sequest, Roy Scheider was in that a long time ago. I think was it the 90s? Sequest DSV. It's on like 3 years. They had a dolphin that they had this little contraption, and when he would make noise, it would change it into language we can understand. These are the kind of things that we need to think about. If we're going to contact, or we're making the attempt to contact. This book focuses on SETI, so the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. That's why, it's kind of hypothesizing what we need to do and what would happen if we did it. And I really enjoy those kind of books. I think that's really, we need to think about these. We need to theorize. We need to hypothesize. We need to really think about how we're going to communicate. We need to work on things of being able to communicate with creatures that we already have here on this planet, because, maybe if we get that under our belt, maybe dolphins, for example, maybe intelligent creatures out there are cetaceans or more like water creatures. And if we make this attempt to communicate with whales and dolphins here on our own planet, maybe that would help us with these intelligent things from another planet. Maybe. Just throwing that out there. But there's a lot of assumptions that we have about the search for extraterrestrial life that this book covers. So again, The Contact Paradox, Challenging Our Assumptions in the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence by Keith Cooper, came out earlier this year, 2020. It's also a pretty decent-sized book, 336 pages, and it's on my Christmas list. So if I don't get it from my wife, maybe you can get it for me. I don't know. We'll see. But that's not the book of the week. The book of the week this week, The UFO Experience, A Scientific Inquiry by J Allen Hynek. And I read this book a number of years ago. I was at a conference. I think I was speaking on ghosts, or maybe it was cryptids. I forget. But I was in a booth next to a guy selling books, and he had this book, and he'd already sold it to somebody, but the guy was still there, and he didn't want to carry it around with him. So I left it there, but I ended up kind of stealing it, and I read through it. Very, very good book. I don't know why I never bought it, but it's very expensive. I think that's probably why I didn't get it. To get it, you're talking $30-40. That's probably why I never got it. Could have got it for $5. I think he sold it for $5. Sheesh. If I'd only known, I would have outbid the guy. But The UFO Experience, A Scientific Inquiry. This was published way back in, I want to say 1972, I want to say. But it's, 1972. But this book is a newer edition. It was reissued in 1998. I don't know if you can get the older ones. But anything Hynek wrote is very interesting. And this one is kind of, I don't want to say about the UFO cases he investigated. It's more or less about the way the Air Force wanted to dismiss things, and a lot of science about explaining UFO sightings. It's not about dismissal. It's more about how to investigate, or investigating these claims that happened back when he was investigating. So The UFO Experience, A Scientific Inquiry by J Allen Hynek is our book of the week this week. And we also have The Contact Paradox, Challenging Our Assumptions in the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence by Keith Cooper, as well as They Are Already Here, UFO Culture and Why We See Saucers by Sarah Scholes. A lot of tongue twisters tonight. Not sure why. Those are our books, extra books. And from there, we're going to go to outer space. So get in your suits, strap into your seats, and the countdown begins. And you know what? I'm not sure why. I'm really getting the feeling that people are not really excited about this. Now, I'd be excited. I don't think that Eric Altman is having a Bigfoot adventure next year. As a question in the chat. I think originally he was planning on having one, but I don't think it's going to happen now with COVID and everything else that's going on. Could sure use that break, but I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think people are excited about what happened on Sunday. It's in the news, but I don't know if people are just distracted by this whole COVID thing or the election or what it is here in the United States. But I was excited, very excited. Live streamed this. I was at work till a little after 8 on Sunday. Kind of live streamed it on my way out of work, watching this. But the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket launched from Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, headed for the International Space Station. I'm excited about that. To some people, it's just another rocket launch. But to me, it's a very momentous occasion, I think. Now, the rocket was carrying a SpaceX Crew 1 Dragon, the company's first operational mission with the Commercial Crew Program. So they weren't launching just objects into space. These were people, finally. Astronauts being launched into space. The Crew Dragon spacecraft was named Resilience back in September by the crew and announced by Mission Commander Michael Hopkins. The flight includes 4 American astronauts and 1 member of the Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency, which is basically the Japanese National Aerospace and Space Agency, which is somewhat similar to NASA here in the U.S. NASA using this commercial craft, pretty much, was announced back in 2012 and was supposed to launch in 2016. But, anything dealing with space, there's a lot of setbacks, including, obviously, COVID-19, which kind of bumped it a few months. And it also limited the number of people in attendance set to watch this launch. And, again, the launch was, I think it was supposed to happen back in March. But with COVID, pushed it to November. In addition to SpaceX, NASA is also going to be using Boeing to carry out missions and their craft as well. It's a lot different than what it was when I was a kid. We had the space shuttle program, and it was something that NASA unfortunately used the lowest bidder to build craft. It was chosen over disposable craft, which I think was actually kind of a good idea in a way because it captured people's attention. Unfortunately, the craft, we lost the Challenger in 1985 and Columbia in 2003. So, on very unfortunate events with those kind of craft, whereas the disposable craft, we might not have had those issues, but it would cost a lot more money in the long run, and that's what NASA was really looking at. But now they're using commercial craft, so they're just basically renting these things. It's still expensive. I mean, space flight is not cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than, especially the way SpaceX is being able to reuse parts of these craft. It's a lot less expensive than NASA designing their own stuff and paying for it out of the government's pocket, or I guess out of my pocket. So it was announced in 2004 that the space shuttle would retire with missions lasting until 2011. Since then, U.S. astronauts have hitched a ride on a Russian Soyuz spacecraft. You know how embarrassing that is? Our own astronauts here in the United States, we were all worried about Sputnik way back when, and now here we are having to hitch a ride with the Russians to get into space. But the Crew 1 Dragon's flight took off Sunday from, again, Launch Pad 39A, which is where the Apollo 11 mission was also launched, and the first and last space shuttle missions as well. So pretty historic flight, and it's fully autonomous. So it's not like the space shuttle flights where they had to do different things. They're just there for the ride. Although they do have a control pad if there's any issues. The flight will take 27 hours to link up with the space station. So they got time to hang out up there. And earlier this November, the International Space Station celebrated 20 years of having inhabitants aboard. And from what I understand about it, there's at least 10 more years of service ahead of it. They have another contract. And boy, oh boy, what a mess that's going to be when that thing is over. It's going to have to be dismantled. And each country is responsible for the module that they put up there. Kind of weird. And that leads me to the last story of the night of the week that's really related to that. And that is the Kessler syndrome. And I've talked about this on the show off and on for quite a while. The Kessler effect, space pollution, pretty much, where satellites and other debris will limit us to travel into space in the future. It's true. It's going to happen. The key part, though, to the Kessler syndrome is having too many objects in lower Earth orbit. So this increases the chance of collisions. A single collision could create a chain reaction that could create even more debris and continue to destroy satellites, which could leave us without our space-based technology. Imagine, no more being able to use satellite radio or to be able to navigate with your navigation devices. A lot of cable and a lot of stuff would just not work very well. Weather would not be as, I know people say that weather is like 30% accurate, but it would be even worse. It would literally launch us back 100 years if these satellites were to crash and crunch and just disintegrate in the atmosphere because of chain reactions. And it sounds like something out of a science fiction book that a single collision causing a chain reaction that would create more and more debris, which would continue to destroy more satellites, leaving us without our space-based technology. And ultimately, with all that debris floating around Earth, would leave us trapped here on Earth. You couldn't launch any more craft into space because it would have to fly through that space debris. And if there's enough of it there, we can't do it. And we're stuck forever. Well, maybe not forever, because eventually the stuff comes down, but it takes a long time. In some cases, some stuff's been up there for 60 years now. So who knows? And how fitting is it that SpaceX was a part of the launch of U.S. astronauts? They've also launched hundreds of these Starlink satellites with the intention of at least 42,000 more. Yikes. And currently, there are about 2,300 active satellites orbiting Earth, with about 3,000 littering space. Low Earth orbit, mid Earth orbit, just junk everywhere up there. You see all these stuff, these videos from the International Space Station. You see like these glints of light and things floating, and people assume, oh my gosh, it's a UFO. And there's tons of space junk up there. And some of that stuff it's pretty small, but up in space, when it reflects light, it looks a lot bigger than what it is. 3,000 satellites littering space, in addition to tons of other parts and pieces stuck in orbits for different periods of time. Eventually, everything comes down for the most part. It could take a long time. Some of that stuff is up there for good, unless we move it. Unless we get a big space net and swoop it in and bring it down. So last month, the European Space Agency released its annual report on space debris, and it states that the risk of dangerous collisions is on the rise. So this Kessler syndrome is an ever-increasing possibility And as a matter of fact, in October, there was a close call between a defunct Russian satellite that was launched in 1989 and a spent Chinese rocket, which was launched in 2009. And these got very, very close together. There was a kind of a low possibility. I think it was like 10% chance that these things would collide. But if they did collide, or they got close enough, could have created thousands of pieces of space junk, and that would have created a potential chain reaction, just like described by the Kessler effect. So this is an all too real potential out there. And the more junk that we launch into space, the higher possibility we have of having these accidents in space. Potentially some of these larger pieces could come down and could injure people. Not likely due to the fact that the Earth is mostly water, but there's that potential. But also, losing our technology, we've become pretty reliant upon our satellites. And, we lose a lot of things pretty quickly. And it would be very hard for us to adapt. I mean, I remember driving without satellites with the talking things. I don't know. I used to use maps. It wouldn't bother me a bit, but it's going to send us back if this does happen. It's very dangerous, and again, it could lead us down the road to being trapped on our own planet. How scary would that be? Not being able to ever launch another craft into space, to ever go back to the moon, to ever travel to Mars, to be able to get off this Earth that we're destroying slowly. But that's our news tonight. Gotta end that on an upbeat. Wait, that's not very upbeat. But anyway, keep you up at night, I guess. Hopefully you have a good week, and I will see you next week. But for now, keep your eyes in the skies, your ears in the woods, the hair standing on the back of your neck, and always keep your mind slightly ajar. And above all else, come on, you know it. Don't stop believing. For the Paranormal News Insider, this is Dr. Brian D. Parsons reporting.